It's like now.
Right, we're up.
Okay. So Abhijay and Yash, they were working on the Get Nighthawk doc sidebar. So basically, what we discussed in the last to last call was that this is like covering the text, and like we should probably move it to the side. And we suggested, I think, the top left corner over here. And they've come up with two designs. So one is this rectangular one, which looks like this, and the other one is this one. So we were discussing on the shape, and I think Nikhil suggested that we shouldn't have this in the first place because it actually takes the user to a completely different layout. In the mobile view, we probably should skip the navigator altogether.
Cool. And this is the website's call for Monday, February 28th. Nice. So yeah, there's a couple of, I think one of the things that is a challenge for, in part is a challenge for the way that this site is that, well, it's a single site and it has, information about the project, its features, its functions. And then it also has a full set of, well, or it has documentation as well. And the documentation is, is enough to navigate onto its own. So there had been kind of two menus at one point, one for like the project facing, feature facing site, and then one for the docs. So if you go, just as you think through this fully, if you go to the docs, and we should just confirm whether or not, okay, so you're in the main doc, okay? And if you try to navigate to a subsection, is that possible currently? Oh, okay, all right, I'm confused. Okay, so that's, yeah, okay. So that's what that's for. Oh, that's what that's for, is the second menu. Okay, cool. Good. I don't need to express any more opinion. Like I think you guys are going to get it figured out. So good. I wasn't faking it. That wasn't for effect. I didn't know what that was for. So.
So do we need it, or do we remove it completely for the mobile view?
Considering that's the only source of navigation for docs, like we should. And in that case, having it at the bottom would be better, in my opinion. I would love to have a link.
I'm not able to hear you properly. Let me turn up voice.
Yeah, I'm saying is, considering that's the only source of navigator for docs page, I think we are good to have the sidebar.
Yeah.
And in that case, having it at the top or at the bottom doesn't matter much. Like if anyone has any strong points, then we could go with that. I don't have any specific suggestions.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think like having it on edge will be better idea. Like it is in floating state right now, and that doesn't look that good. So I think like placing it on edge will be a better idea than the current state. So yeah.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I thought I wasn't audible. Why are we not using?
Hello. Hello.
Okay. 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 I was just asking that why are we not using the one like in the community handbook, like this? Yeah. Easy table of contents. Like I've sent the link. Like just a table of contents above with the arrow to expand it.
We can use it. I think whoever did this was trying. something else. Like it's not necessary to use this.
Yeah, because we can't tell the main motive of the sidebar here. But if we specify it as table of contents, they will know properly what it stands for.
Yeah, we can implement it.
And
So
yeah,
can
that
we go with that? Like the table of content bar.
makes sense to me. Does anyone else have anything opposing that?
Yeah, just if you end up leaving both menus, so I think that there's merit to what Nikhil had said about maybe that maybe there isn't a need for two menus. Should two menus stay? And the most intuitive menu being the one that's in the upper right hand corner, because it's just that's more of a common placement. But if they both do stay, that like Yash's pull tab in the Meshri UI, if there were something similar, kind of a vertical rectangular slider or a bar that you click on that says TO, I don't know what I mean, the acronym TOC isn't necessarily intuitive either. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Okay, fine. Now Abhijay is just showing off, I guess. Okay. But yeah, I mean, that's a heck of a lot. It's a great step right there. I mean that to me, especially if the double chevrons were like vertically aligned or horizontally in the middle, that's certainly indicative of like, I would expect to see something of a menu. I would expect to see a temporary, something. And then to the extent that that's a navigator, that makes a ton of sense,
Yeah, for that the purpose, yes, said that it is not specifying the use case, so we can use tooltip for that. Like on tooltip we will add, but yeah, it is not working mobile phone, so tooltip will not helpful. Yeah. Okay. So maybe that is understood that that arrow will show you the site content, so we may not need to specify for the mobile view.
I think this looks fine for now. Is that what you're concluding?
Yeah.
Right. So you have another agenda item here.
Yeah, so can you open that PR? So yeah, Vidya is working on implementing Open Graph for the Nighthawk project, but like she was facing some health issue, that's why she is not able to contribute on this pair. But like I tried on my side, I use the same dimensions which is mentioned for the Twitter and for the Facebook, but it is not working. I don't know why it is not working. So can we apply? I have a question that can we apply padding on these images? Is it possible to allow to apply padding on these images, because it is not taking the actual size? It is not fitting in the image, like it is get cropped for Twitter and Facebook specifically. And I use the exact same directions, which is dimensions, which is 1200 into 630. So yeah.
Cool. I missed that last part, but Abhijay, did you say that you had taken the liberty of resizing the image backgrounds?
Yeah.
And to do that, you adjust the logo itself wasn't touched, just the background, the dimensions of the background of the image were changed?
Yeah, like it is getting cropped for the Twitter and Facebook, but the same dimensions are working for Discord and LinkedIn also. But I don't know why it is not working for Facebook and Twitter.
Oh, okay. So no, you haven't manipulated the logo. Okay. Yeah. So it's really quick for us to cut a new image that has additional margin, additional padding in the background. By the background, I mean not the green part of the logo, but the rest of the image itself just needs a little more. They like to have certain aspect ratios, and so Twitter is set to do like a fill content type thing, and so if the image isn't in of the dimensions of the aspect ratio that they like, or not, I'm sorry, that they like, but that they use, then your image will spill over, like ours is. So we need it to be a little taller than it is wider. And so
yeah, but like I tried to manipulate image once, but it is not working. Like I tried the exact same direction that is offered by Twitter, which is 1200 into 630, but it is not working here. And I also added some padding to the logo as well.
nice. Yeah. There's somebody else on the call that has had some trouble with sizing images for. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Hey, I'll go. Do you know what the dimensions are? I could help if that. I'll go look it up. That's fine. I'll go look it up and cut a new image and see if it fits.
Okay.
Cool. That's great. This is. Oh, I'm sorry. Remind me, did we say we wanted the image with or without the word Nighthawk?
It depends on you. Like I don't know. Well, like
Okay.
logo is fine. We don't need to define Nighthawk.
Okay. Cool. I'll go look back at my old comment, my old self. Oh, great. This is great. That sounds like we'll be done with this one before the end of the call. So that's great.
Okay.
Okay. So the next topic is by Siddharth. He's on the call, right? Yeah. Siddharth, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, hello. Can you guys see my screen?
No. I'm just kidding, Siddharth. We just
Yeah. So Abhijay assigned me this task. So in this task, I had to like optimize the images which are present in the community section of Layer 5 website. So there is a image carousel, and I had to
Lot of fun today.
Yeah, so I had to optimize these images. So I use some plugins, Gatsby image plugin, and what happened after optimizing these images, some of the images kind of got cropped out from top and bottom. So I have no clue how to like solve it. I can show you like how it looks. So most of the images are working perfectly, but give me a second. Like this Google Summer of Code, this image is cropped out from top and bottom. So there are some couple of images which are getting cropped. So I like this image also, like it is getting cropped from top and bottom. I tried to fix it using CSS properties. Like I used bunch of CSS property so that it could get contained inside a wrapper. But turns out like after optimizing, it is getting cropped. So how to do it, I have no idea.
I asked it around in Gatsby community about the image cropping. We are also facing it in the books
Service,
page. Yeah,
Books.
books page. They are saying that it might be a single image issue. They're also not sure about that. Because in a slider of 4, there is only one image which is cropping out. So yeah.
Yeah, even I tried to like find the solution. Once I dropped this question and asked in the Discord, Gatsby official Discord community, and CTO itself commented on my query, and he suggested me to fix the resolution before optimization. And I tried to figure out how to fix the like set up the resolution part, but I couldn't able to.
Just as a quick recap, you're trying to make some performance improvements by ensuring that the file size of each of the images loads with as high quality as possible, but also as quickly as possible. In doing so, we're relying on the plugin to help with that. Part of what you're finding is that the images don't quite fit. That's what you're saying. Some of them, one or two of them get cropped.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. That just has to do again with the exact kind of issue that we're facing. We were just talking about it. It's about aspect ratio. I mean, if you think about it, like it wouldn't really, yeah, see right there on the right-hand side where this had, well, okay. So, you see how the right-hand side arrow is off and there's extra margin on the right-hand side?
Okay, yeah.
That may or may not have anything to do with aspect ratio. Some of that might have to do, but it also might have to do with just the rest of the CSS around this, around the container that contains the carousel, also the carousel itself and whether or not it's resizing. But to the extent that it doesn't necessarily feel like, to the extent that someone else had suggested that maybe the size of the images, the aspect ratio, which means like how tall it is versus how wide it is.
Yeah.
That'll definitely throw anything off, unless it's set to either like overfill, like spill over content, or underfill, or what have you. Like then, like see right there that picture. If you go back one,
Okay.
or two now, to the Istio up and running. So it's quite a tall image. If you can you do me, okay, so if we, okay, all right, so do you guys see the the chevron that is the up arrow in the lower right hand corner? Doesn't that look strikingly like it fits very well in the margin there? Maybe because maybe it's having an effect in bumping over the carousel, potentially, is another potential possibility. If you press refresh right now and you leave your screen size the same, do we still have the same margin issue? Doing these couple of tests can tell you like, hey, it's an aspect ratio issue with the images that are in the carousel, or it's not. And like more because of the results of what just happened, it's like, maybe it's not having to do with the aspect ratio of the image because it's okay. Actually, another way of testing is reduce the width by a quarter. So have it like 3/4 of the width of what you have it right now, if you would. So Siddharth, if you restore your browser size, like unmaximize, demaximize, click on the maximize button. I'm not sure how else to say it. We might have lost Siddharth. anyway, the point of the tests were to see if the up arrow, that up chevron, is causing an issue. Right. It seemed like space might have been reserved for it. So another way of kind of confirming is to reduce the width of the browser window a bit, and then, okay. Yeah, so it doesn't really, and then if you refresh the screen, yeah, my money is on that chevron, that top button being the issue. Seems like it's probably, I don't know, maybe not. Like it overlaps. See, if you position the chevron right in the middle of the, if you go up just a little bit, yeah, right there, yeah. Okay, the fact that it's overlapping, okay, maybe there's, yeah, I don't know, maybe like that. I think that sort of throws my theory out of the water. Never mind.
Well, you can check this out once, because what do you want to find? This margin is way more than this. Should be center aligned, and I don't think he has done anything the alignment of this. I think we lost Siddharth, right? Yeah, cool. So the next topic is by Nikhil. Do you wanna talk about this?
So, like as per the latest reports of PageSpeed Insights, only issue that we have as a problem, like the major issue, is unwanted JavaScript loading. And those two are affected by two major libraries, which are one of them being how Meshri works diagram, and the other one being the SRL image wrapper. So in this one, I tried like, okay, another one was in one of the in layout components, somehow we were referring as our language to Portuguese instead of English. I just noticed that. So that was also updated in the PR, though it's that yet too much. And the other one is limiting this component to the pages only where it is used. But so this weekend I did some digging, and unfortunately, how Gatsby work is it creates the packages or the like Webpack is used as the mediator to create the package or the scripts which would be load for the pages. And by default, since it's a static site, all the scripts are loaded together on the homepage itself by default if we are not lazy loading it. So in case of our website, we don't until React 18 we don't have React Lazy supported, so we don't have the feature of React Lazy. But there's another option that is loadable component, and Gatsby provides a plugin which is Gatsby loadable component SSR for server side rental. But the recent issue is it is not compiling after using the plugin. So this PR as of now doesn't accomplish that issue to limit the package to that particular page. That package is still being imported, used on the home page. So that's why I've marked this PR as draft because like it doesn't fulfill the purpose of that. So in the last one, like I tried to use that plugin and was failing and getting a compilation issue. So if anyone has time and want to try it out, this could try installing this plugin in their local environment and see if the site build successful or not.
Oh, Nikhil, you're a little hard to hear. I was trying to keep up. I think for my part, I think I got the gist of what you had said. Can you repeat the last part of you had said, hey, if anyone has any time?
So this the plugin which I mentioned in the chat, that is used to load the components when it's needed by that particular page, or when the viewport is in that particular page. But unfortunately, when I tried to use that plugin in our project in Layer 5 site and try to build the site locally, it was failing. So I've added that, like I've commented it in the respective GitHub repo of that particular plugin. Like there was an issue related to it some time ago. They made a release and supposedly that should have been fixed, but that's still reproducible. So I just wanted to know if anyone else could try and if they are getting the same thing. Then, so that might be the case. Like for my
gotcha.
aspect, if we use this plugin, then we could avoid that unwanted JavaScript chunk issue, and our performance might improve.
So is the thing that would help for one or two people to check out the PR that you have and try to make the site using the version of the plugin that you have in that PR? Is that what you're saying?
So that PR doesn't have that plugin as of now. I've only tried it out in my local environment. One needs to install it manually following the instructions in the respective link, which is attached to the meeting.
Okay. Gotcha.
I'll try to use this in my local ones and stuff as well. Okay. So does anyone else have any other topics to add? Because these are some things. I was looking at the learning paths quiz and I noted some points down on what we can do next from here. But if you have any other topics you would like to discuss, you can mention them right now. No? Cool. Then I'll
Just two more.
Yeah.
So one of them being related to the cache issue that we discussed in the last meeting. Unfortunately, we can't control that part because that is controlled by GitHub pages, and nothing we could do if we are deploying it on GitHub pages. Secondly, the other one is related to the security issue which was reported for one of the pages on the site, which was related to X-frame headers, and that again is restricted. So for context, I will have to use this. Lee, do you have that error?
Yeah, let me. Yeah, I'll look now. This was it just sort of cross-site scripting for? Let's see, yeah. Or was it clickjacking? Yeah, so was this issue for layer 5.io or was it for Meshery.io?
For layer 5. Okay. So yeah, for the issue. Okay, so the thing is, on our current site, for the pages we are not getting the X-frame header, which would block the user to use our page as an iframe in their respective site. This, if one can do so, then that would allow clickjacking issue, like allowing someone to use our site as a dummy image in their own site, so that someone could hack your machine or do some other stuff which you are not intended to do. So that would, but using X parameters, that could be avoided. But again, that brings us to the issue that since we are using GitHub pages, we can't control the header option.
Oh, that's a shame. Yeah, I mean, like the individual that sent in the clickjacking security concern is doing what a lot of people do, which is looking to build up a resume of having sent in security issues. And it's just like, that's never going to affect, we don't really ask anybody for, yeah, we did, A, there's nothing we can do about it. B, it ain't ever going to happen. C, it's wasting our time. I don't know. It, like, unless you guys see it differently, unless like I don't see anyone. We don't ask anyone, like the big, okay, so with clickjacking and with the type of clickjacking that is being reported, if we were asking someone to log in on layer5.io, then there might be incentive to try to clickjack, to try to trick our users into filling in their credentials, sensitive info, and trying to steal it. I mean, today there's none of that going on, other than someone typing in an email address into a form, and there's like zero incentive for anybody to actually come and try to clickjack us. Plus so the probability is quite low, the severity is quite low, and then our ability to do anything about it at the moment is nil. So it's like, now, having said that, as we look toward the learning paths and we look to have people log in, so that they can keep track of their bookmarks, so they can keep track of maybe quizzes and quiz answers that they've asked and that they've answered, and maybe whether or not they've received a certificate of completion or certificate for the knowledge that they've gained. But there's a little more incentive. That particular service or like the pages where we'd have people authenticate and retrieve their info, those would most likely be like, or the plan is for that to be run off of not off of GitHub Pages, but off of a server that we control. And so the plan would be the same authentication service that we run to allow people to sign into Meshery. That's probably the same. It's a small Golang program that was written here, so that we control. It runs in a super tiny VM on AWS, and so we can take and redirect this clickjacking concern to that. I mean, that would be my suggestion. And so, okay, well, where will that be? Today, the start of that is at meshery.layer5.io. If you visit that URL right now, it will not prompt you to sign in. It will say, oh, wait, your version of, so yeah, it's meshery.layer5.io. It won't prompt you to sign in. It'll say, wait, you don't have a version of Meshery. Your local version of Meshery has a mismatch. It's not the same version. We're not compatible with Meshri Cloud. That's because this system isn't meant for general purpose login. It's meant for a Meshri server instance, a Meshri UI instance, to initiate a login request. And when it does, it passes along certain query string parameters. And since those are missing, so anyway, so we don't really have a clickjacking. We're not really vulnerable to clickjacking because there's nothing to jack. And then, so that sets that aside for our current, site. Moving forward, as we have the ability to sign in, it's like, yeah, okay, this is good. This is actually, we have a healthy suggestion up front that we should make sure that our server is setting these X-frame headers So one thing that we could test, I think right now, is if we were to look at the page source on this page, is it setting those headers? And if not, this is a good place to address it. Or we can address it up front, I should say. So, I mean, at a glance, it doesn't appear to be. Nikhil, now the solution, a question for you, in case you know, the solution here needs to be performed server side, because otherwise, if it was just client side, you could hack around that, or hackers could get around that setting. So the setting needs to come from the web server, from the server that's serving the pages. So, so good. So there's, so Nikhil and Devapriya are, I think, the only two people on the call at the moment that have access to that server, because they're lifers here. so they have access to like everything. And so I'll go take a second action item and point out where this might be fixed, like where the best place to potentially address this is. So okay. All right. Action items. Security. Quick checking. You gotta love the name of that security vulnerability though. Click jacking. Does that make sense to everybody? Like, you know, click jacking, to me, it's not being security focused. You know, it's something that I had to go look up to just sort of see the details of what might go on. And it's, you know, more or less like a form of a man in the middle attack, which is to say with iframes, you know, for everyone that's familiar with iframes, you can conveniently take the content of what would otherwise be a web page, and maybe a web page that's hosted somewhere else, that you can display one web page inside of another web page, basically. And so what Nikhil was describing, just to describe clickjack, just for everyone to get something out of the last 8 minutes of me droning on, clickjacking is essentially a man in the middle attack and someone correct me if I get this wrong, but it's a man in the middle attack in which a visitor would go to a URL, or, you know, they would visit a URL. Unbeknownst to them, there would basically be an iframe that's transparent, that's sort of invisible to them, that is more or less, you know, essentially sitting on top of the real site that you're visiting. So since it's transparent, you basically see the real site, and you click through it, you type into it, you do what you normally, you know, to a user, it's transparent, but unbeknownst to them, because there's this like transparent iframe sitting in between their keyboard and their mouse, that iframe is able to capture keystrokes and mouse clicks and basically capture sensitive info in that way. So, but if I got that wrong, you know, correct me. So this will be in Golang. So the small Golang server that we run, that runs Meshri Cloud. So yeah, is where we would set it. If we don't have much else to talk about on the rest of the call, I can show everybody Meshri Cloud, some of the behind the scenes stuff, if that's exciting. But if we have any other agenda, then please continue.
You can show it.
Oh, you say it again?
You can show it. We don't have a lot of it.
Oh, okay. Would anyone like to have a quick tour? Oh, yes, you would. Oh, yes, you would. Okay. All right. So, where are we? Okay, so all right, so Meshri is made up of many components. The way that we package the core of Meshri, the Meshri server, Meshri UI, that's generally packaged into the same container image. And then we have individual container images for Meshri's adapters. Another component is Meshri Cloud, which is it's a remote provider. So when you run Meshri, whether you're building it locally or you're just running it as a user would, when you run Meshri, it will ask you to log in. This is the first page that you see when you pull up your Meshri interface. You're actually, you're sitting at this URL /provider, which is to say that Meshri's REST endpoints, Meshri's REST-based API server and Meshri's GraphQL-based API server, they both have all of their API endpoints protected. Because Meshri, when it's administrating your clusters, it has a lot of power, has a lot of access to your cluster. So you want to protect those endpoints so that someone doesn't, some nefarious actor doesn't use Meshri to delete a service mesh or delete your cluster or that kind of a thing. So almost all of the Meshri server endpoints, which are either one of two things, it's either a REST endpoint or a GraphQL endpoint, they're all protected except for like one. I think just one is open. And you can actually go to it by /API. You can hit it at /API/system/version. So I haven't authed to the system yet. And I'm running in a private browser window, which means I don't have a cookie or an active token. I haven't authenticated. If I go to API system/version, we just get back a small JSON blob that says a bit of info about Meshri server, about the system and its version. So the build number of Meshri, here's the build number. Here's the current build that I'm running. Here's the latest build that's out there. It's saying it's outdated. Wait. Oh, okay. Am I outdated? Am I running an old server? It's saying, no, you're not. You're running the latest. Okay. Anyway, well, I don't need to explain all this stuff. Anyway, the point is like everything's protected except this endpoint. This endpoint isn't protected because if you want to run something like Meshri CTL version, like without having logged into your system, you wouldn't be able to run something like this unless this is unprotected. So Meshri CTL, it's just another REST API client. So if I did try to access something like performance profiles, this is authed. So this client has a token that it's using that this client is separately authenticated. which is kind of interesting, right? This client is not authenticated because it's a private session. Okay. Anyway, I digress. All right. So if you go, when you go sign in, this is Meshri Cloud. This is a remote provider. So and there's a lot of details about this that are in the community drive, as well as some of it, these are in the docs themselves. So what just happened is when I chose a provider, if I go back, so from here, I choose a provider, I get redirected to wherever that provider is hosted. And in this case, Meshri Cloud as a provider is hosted at meshri.layer5.io. Now, because my request came from Meshri server, from Meshri's UI right there, it also included some of those additional query string parameters that I was referring to. So it has this login challenge, which is specific to Meshri and necessary, because the Meshri Cloud, it expects to see a challenge. Otherwise, today it'll just respond with that error saying, there's a mishmash, right? There's a mismatch. So Meshri Cloud is a system that has 3 components. It has a small Golang, there's some diagrams of this, too, but there's a small Golang server, super tiny Golang, that the Golang server is serving up this web page, and it's facilitating connectivity to any of these identity providers. So Meshri Cloud is not an identity provider. It does not say, oh, you could also use your email address and then create your own local account that's specific to Meshri Cloud. Like, it doesn't give you that option because it's not an identity provider. It's just facilitating the transaction for authenticating you with other popular identity providers. Part of how it does that is it runs another component called Hydra. Well, Hydra from Ori, which is an open source project. ORY Hydra. Hydra is an open auth 2.0 compatible, open ID compatible. Hydra is an OAuth 2 OpenID Connect provider. In other words, an implementation of OAuth 2. And so it helps. So there's another component that we're using that helps facilitate some of the complexities of doing the OAuth 2 exchange and the OpenID exchange. So that's the second component inside of Meshri Cloud. And so when I click here, part of Hydra will come into play. Like it's beginning to facilitate now the interaction between, in this case, Twitter. And so now I'm interacting. If you notice, I'm at api.twitter.com. So now I've been redirected. My user is interfacing with Twitter. Twitter is going to say the credentials that you're providing are either correct and you are who you say you are, or not. And since those are correct, Twitter will respond back to Meshri Cloud saying, yeah, this person is good to go. Meshri Cloud, that Hydra component, it will generate a new JWT token because what it was looking for from Twitter was just, I don't know who these credentials are. You do. Are these accurate? Yes or no? Yes, they are. Okay, I'll generate a new token. This person, this user is saying is who Twitter says they are. Right? And then without the user knowing, really, then after the token is generated, Meshri Cloud, that Golang server, redirects you back to your original local Meshri UI. So all of a sudden I'm back at localhost. That whole transaction is diagrammed and kind of separate. But okay, so then now every time that I go to interact with any of the APIs being served, I have a valid authentication token and can nav through the system. The third component to Meshri Cloud. So the third component to Meshri Cloud is a small Postgres database. Just a real small Postgres database that just keeps track of stuff that goes on. So to give you one more, so Meshri Cloud, that small little Golang server, it just has it has like 6 web pages or so. It's pretty small. And some of those have to do with just, there's a backend admin section. Let me make this a little bigger. Doesn't really matter. And since we're streaming to YouTube, I'll show some generic, I won't show these other 2 areas, but some statistics about the rate by which, or the number of events that are occurring in Meshri Cloud. So like from the time that we've been running it, how many people have signed up, how many times have test results been published, how many times have people logged in. So there's kind of these 4 statistics: logins, performance test results, conformance test results, and individual signups. And so there's different ways of looking at it, but this is just a cumulative graph of that over time. So an interesting stat to look at is like, just over the last couple of years, how many people have signed up? So back in March of 2019, there were about 3 for that month. And there were 20 for the next month. So today, just for Meshri Cloud itself, there have been about almost 1,200 people who've signed in. So that's good. That's good. That's one thing to look at. Let's reduce the width of this so that the curve looks nicer. There we go. Look at that. That's amazing. Look at how steep that is. Okay. So, okay. Anyway, there's a different, whoa, look at that. There's a different one here. This login is actually mislabeled. It's not login as much as it is anytime that you're inside of Meshri Cloud and you're sort of refreshing the screen or going to a different screen. If you're signed into Meshri Cloud, which some users sign in and some don't, and I don't know what percentage of the difference that is, then this is just, it keeps track of all the events, like how many times that happens. And so, yeah, anyway, this is what the Postgres database tracks, is just things like events. So you can tell, so on these days, these individual, this is not cumulative, this is just on a per day basis. Like some of these days we might have had a workshop. So number of signups per day, 35 on that day. That was probably at a workshop. So, okay. So anyway, in order to set the X-frame headers, there's a small Golang program that we would, that uses similar frameworks as to what Meshri server does. So I think Gorilla is used as a framework, not that that would be where that header would have to be set. Questions? Or?
My question was, when we that server, that particular server is only authenticated when we deploy Meshri local, right? When we do Meshri CTL system start. Only after that we are getting that authentication.
Yeah, well, wait, so wait, say it one more time. Like,
so in the local machine, once we execute the Meshri CTL system start command, only after that we are able to authenticate to Meshri.layer 5.5. Other than that, there is no other way to authenticate to that.
Right. Correct. And that, yeah, correct. And that would be what we would probably look to change as we go to persist bookmarks or other learning path things, that we would want to update Meshri Cloud to let people log in at any time. I mean, it doesn't have to be that login event doesn't have to be sourced from Meshri server, from Meshri UI. And so then Meshri Cloud, like, oh, well, maybe we start to call it something else, like, or because it has multiple purposes then. It's not just for authenticating to Meshri, but it makes, I think, some decent sense that we would use the same auth system and not separately run one auth system for an account over at Meshri and one auth system for an account over on the learning paths. Like one, because we have.
How does it detect that we are specifically executing that command and only then what?
Yeah. So wait, how about the data that we were specifically?
So how does that server gets to know that we are successfully started Meshri and only then allow the user to authenticate?
Oh yeah. So very good question. So if we go out to Meshery, and the interaction that people initially have is like this. You go to your local host of your local Meshri server, and I just opened a private browsing window, so it doesn't have a cookie, like it doesn't have an authentication token. It's not presenting, my web client is not presenting one. So Meshri server says, wait, you're not authenticated. I'm going to block you. I'm going to stop you out here on /provider. And so to answer Nikhil's question, it's like, okay, so /provider, this small, like there's Meshri UI, and Nikhil's very aware of this. But like, as you tie all these pieces together, there's Meshri UI as a web app, and then a separate web app /provider. The primary, like maybe we can consolidate, but the primary reason for this separation is that basically all the basically anything that Meshri UI wants to serve up it's going to require that there's a token present. And Meshri, the /provider UI, intentionally, it's very super small and it doesn't require a token. It just facilitates choosing one provider over the next. And so to answer Nikhil's question, it's like, okay, in the moment in which you choose one provider over the next, the provider UI will pass along, like will redirect the user to their selected provider. And it will also add on additional info, like it'll format that query with additional info. And so the specifics, the even more specifics to answer that question are like under here in provider UI, and then looking at the endpoint that it has for, so this provider component JS, when someone makes that selection, like we would sort of look back through, okay, well, when they make that selection, what internal endpoint is being called? And then we go look at that Golang and look at like what additional like query string info, like what else is it passing along? Handle menu item click, okay. So here, API provider, query string, provider equal, like this would be when they would have selected a certain provider. So in code, so from here, you start to track back through. I assume that I can't remember, like I assume that there's Golang involved in terms of not just redirecting straight from JavaScript, but it might be straight from JavaScript too.
Yeah, understood. Oh, actually, yeah. So now I remember that particular API hits the Redux database in the between, and that Redux handles the API.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, it's been. Yeah, that's right. Actually, Nikhil, you've worked on this specific. Yeah, I mean, any number of times you've worked on this UI. I forgot. Yeah, one of the things that was that Piyush Singaria is he has an open pull request on is to stop this behavior, the behavior where if you don't have the appropriate query string, that you'll get this response. He's removing that. The primary reason that we had this in the past was because at one point, Meshri Cloud and Meshri Server had different capabilities. And at one point, their versions they behaved in an incompatible way. And so we wanted to make sure that this is like a year and a half ago, that if people had mismatched versions, that they were presented, they weren't just given an error, that they were given some information about what to do. And so it's hard coded in here, and it might be in this string, I don't know. It's hard coded in here that it does a version check to see what version of Meshri Server you're running. And it's like a year and a half old. We don't need to worry about the compatibility anymore. They've been compatible for a long time. We need to remove this check so that as a next step, what people would see is they would basically see not this, they would see this, whether they came from Meshri UI or not. And we need to start to, okay, fine. And then as a next step, it's like, well, maybe they're using this from learning paths. So maybe it shouldn't say just Meshri. Maybe it's to say that we can walk through the rest of what those use cases look like. Yeah. So. Yeah, it's an intriguing, it's an intriguing set of interactions too, just for the OAuth 2 flow and like. Anybody else? Nice. I've got a couple of action items. I'm going to go get busy on mine. So Abajay, I'll get a couple of new logos to you.
Yeah, I'll bring this up in the next call. There was one small thing, again based on the PageSpeed reports, that some images don't have an explicit width and height. So I'll create issues for that. So this is basically serve two purpose. One is it maintains the aspect ratio even in smaller screen sizes, and the second is related to the cumulative layout shift. So basically, it doesn't hinder the display of whatever is on the page too much. So we need to specify this, and I'll create issues for that.
Yeah, actually, this is kind of like, actually, I would have said the inverse, that if you specify statically both width and height, you will find yourself with some aspect ratio pain. That it has always been my experience that so long as you only define width or height as something, if you're specifying it other than just 100% or auto, you could specify them both as 100% or both of them as auto, and you're probably fine in terms of aspect ratio being maintained. But I've found that if you specify them both statically and do resizing of the browser, that it's then that you can find yourself, like if you're just specifying one, it will make sure that one, someone.
Okay, so, that happens when you specify the exact size, like basically 200 pixels width or something like that. This one is like, this is not the size, this is the ratio that we specify. Like, if I have to show you an example. This will not make any sense. Wait 1 second. So basically, in the image tag itself, we just add, suppose width 200, that's all, and height 100. So that will maintain the 2:1 ratio. Like that is what I think. We don't specify pixels or rems. Like we don't give the unit, and it's the ratio that we specify, and that is how it is split.
Oh,
Like
weird.
basically the problem which people have done, like which you were talking about, is in the CSS, they give width equal to 100 pixel and height equal to 200 pixel. That is the problem. That is when it gets restricted to 200 pixels even in the mobile view. This is a little different. This is not the specific width that you give. This is very issue. I'll probably create like give an example when I create.
I'm just taking notes. I'm just learning. Yeah, no, seriously, it's always confused me. But like that behavior that I've said is true, but it's always been, to me, it's always been confusing. Like if you're specifying 200 pixels, 100 pixels, like you're specifying, you want this, like you're specifying not only the size, but you're also like locking in the aspect ratios. So then why, when you resize things, does that get wonky? Like that's always been a question mark in my mind. And if I'm understanding correctly, and this is in part why I'm writing it down, because I like one way of, yeah, it's kind of a weird thing. Like if you don't specify unit, unit of measure.
Yeah, like what I was saying is this is wrong. Like when you give pixels, it will actually cause the aspect ratio to be problematic. But if you do something like this, it will maintain the 50:40, 400 ratio.
I think that won't work, because that, like what Lee mentioned, is actually how it works. Even if you don't specify the unit, it will default to pixel.
Yeah, I also think same. Like if we don't define the limits, then it will take pixel, the units. Yeah.
Okay. I bet.
You could try it out locally to confirm.
Yeah.
If that was fine. But as far as now, it would default to pixel.
But there's also, yeah, and I understand that to be true as well, which is the same thing for font size, that like if you just say 12, then, and you don't specify unit size, that it, like, since pixel was like, is the grandfather of metrics, I think, the grandmother, that it kind of default. But having said that though, there's still an open question mark in my mind. Like there's still credence to be given to what Deborah was saying, which is, there's a potential behavioral difference between when you do explicitly specify unit of measure as versus when you don't. There's a potential, like to the same extent that there is a behavioral difference when you, like if you don't specify a height or a width, what would you anticipate the behavior to be? Probably 100%. Like behind the scenes, what is it sort of interpreting itself as? Anyway, so my point is, like, if you don't explicitly specify, there may be behavioral differences between when you do specify a unit of measure and when you don't, even though like behind the scenes, it defaults to PX, there might still be another behavior that's present as well.
Basically, how I came up with this was I was looking at lazy loading of images and videos. So over there, one problem that happens is, suppose it loads after a long time. If you don't have that space occupied for the image, it comes in all of a sudden. So that was what the reports were saying. So that is why I looked into this, and I, like, based on what I've read, that was what I was telling right now. I didn't test it out locally. So I'll do that once. And I might be wrong, I'm sorry for that. But after that, I'll conclude. Okay, so we're 15 minutes over time and we're done for today. Anyone else have anything else to say? Any other questions? If not, then thank you for joining. See you all next week or this weekend. I don't call.
It's been a long Monday already. So thank you, Deborah. Nice to see you all.